So welcome everybody. My name is Pierre Labarthe. I'm a researcher at INRAE, the French Public Research Institute on Agricultural Food and Environment. And I'm also the coordinator of AgriLink. AgriLink is a H2020 research and innovation project that started in June 2017 and that will finish in a few weeks. It's really our great pleasure to welcome you all for the final conference of our project. The aim of this conference is, of course, to share research findings with you, but we also want to try to contribute to broader debates about how to enhance farm advice and policy for sustainable development of European agriculture. Of course, it would have been a pleasure to meet you all face to face, but the sanitary situation was too uncertain at the time we have to make the decision, so we decided to go online. And the good thing about going virtual is that many of you could register, more than 200 people, and connect today. We are close to 100 participants, which is quite impressive. So thanks to all of you. But of course, going virtual for so many people is also quite a challenge for us. So we will try to be as much interactive as possible in the next session. And we will try to combine different formats with presentation, videos, workshop, question and answer, roundtable, testimonies, and the use of Menti, as Mark would just say. We did lots of rehearsal and make our best to run it smoothly, but if there is some technical difficulty, we kindly ask you for your indulgence on this, as we took some risk in the setting of the meeting. As you have seen, we have opted for a very simple and open Zoom platform setting to allow for a maximum of interactivity and inclusion in this meeting. This, of course, comes with a set of communication instructions that you all know. So the first one is to please try not to forget to mute your microphone when not speaking. Second is we also invite you to make an extensive use of the chat. We will review and monitor the chat constantly. You can see Eloise in a small library over there. She will review the chat. And in all sessions later on, there will be some question and answer. And we will select some of the questions in the chat, and we will give you the floor to raise a selected question. So please be also ready to open your microphone and video when we will ask you to raise your question to have a more lively and interactive moment. But before I introduce our project in more detail, we thought it would be nice to have a short ice-breaking moment to better know you and learn where do you come from, your organization, and what are your expectations about advisory services and this conference in particular. So, Mark, the floor is yours for this first session, please.
Super, thanks very much, Pierre. So I'm just going to share my screen, and I hope that everybody can see that now, can see the Mentimeter application. I'm sure many of you have used it before. It's very, very simple to use. It's very easy to use on your smartphone, or if you're on a computer with multiple screens, actually on the computer. You should go to the URL www.menti.com, and you will see this simple screen. And if you then enter the following code, 8457 7215, and then press submit, and then you should be into the application. My colleague Elena has also put the code into the chat, so it's there for reference also. So first of all, we'd just like to actually to give you a few moments to get connected. On your screen, you'll see a thumbs up. If you could just click on the thumbs up, and that gives us a nice clear idea of how many people are actually connected. We have something close now to 100 people in the call, as Pierre says, and super. It looks like people are getting connected very quickly indeed. This is great. We're just going to leave it a few more moments. We appreciate that not everybody may be able to connect. Also, that sometimes it can take just a little while, but we do need to allow people some little bit of time. Okay, we're still clicking on. It does take a while when we've got quite a large group. But also, I need to keep an eye on the time as well. So we've reached 67%, 67. So that's very, very good indeed. So I'm going to go to the next slide. So this is just some very, very simple. Again, many of you may have seen it before, but it's a great way of indicating, for you to indicate where you're coming from. We have a European map dominated by the EU member states, and also we have a globe. And if you happen to be coming from outside of the EU, please just click on the globe to give us an indication that you're from outside of the EU. Oh, well, this is working very nicely indeed. Ah, super. Somebody from elsewhere. And maybe actually you could let us know in the chat where you're coming from outside of Europe. Okay, well, we're quickly up to 58, up to 60 people who have clicked. I'm just going to leave it to see if we've got to the 67, 68 again. Well, I think that gives us a very nice overview. Quite an equal distribution across Europe, from Malta in the south to Norway, across to Ireland, and east into it looks like even possibly somebody from Turkey or from eastern Greece. Excellent. Let's move on again. Now, we're very interested, of course, in the profile of our participants this afternoon. So we'd like you to give us an indication of your professional occupation. And here you can click more than one choice, because we understand often that there are combinations of occupation, farmers and advisors, for example, which is always a very interesting, a very important combination. We've also given you the option, if you've suddenly realized you're in the wrong meeting, then you can just click that and presumably, you're very welcome to stay, actually, even if you are in the wrong meeting. Okay, so currently, and arguably not surprisingly, we have a strong bias towards researchers with us, but also very, very importantly, we have a significant number of policymakers, a significant number of advisors or representatives of advisory organizations, a handful of policymakers, and also a few farmers as well, or representatives of farmer organizations. I can also see that we're up to 78 people online with Menti at the moment, but very, very clearly, well over 50% of our participants would appear to be researchers. So to the next, and this is very much about an important theme of the conference. We're very interested, just as to help to break the ice now, is to get a little bit of feedback, is to give you the opportunity to give us an indication of what you think are the main challenges with farm advice in your own country. And here you can enter up to 3 challenges. As you know, as you will see, it's only very, very short space which is available. So we're looking either for a word or for a very, very short, a short phrase or expression. So we've got 3 immediately. Okay. Challenges. Yeah, would you like to join this reflection on how the word cloud is shaping up? Currently, we've got privatization there in the center. digitalization is occurring quite regularly. We also have some themes emerging, such as climate change.
It's interesting to see privatization at the middle, and that will be a part of our discussion, because we see a growing role of many private actors as one of the results of our research and of what we call linked advice, so advice coming with some private actors which may not be specialized in advice, but providing advice with other activities. So that will be something to reflect upon, as well as a holistic approach and digitalization that we'll be discussing in specific sessions. So,
and certainly not surprising to see climate change emerging as a very important challenge, as a very important thematic challenge. I also, interestingly, I've seen small farmers and access for small farmers as well. And I think that's very interesting, because tomorrow afternoon, we have a webinar that we're organizing jointly with the FAO on the specific issue of empowering small farmers through enhanced access to farm advice, but in particular, the use of digital delivery and some of the potential issues associated with the digitalization of farm extension and advisory services. Excellent. Well, we've now got 95 people interacting with Mentimeter, which is fantastic. And I think we have a very, very rich word cloud, but still in the middle, very interestingly, holistic approach. And that's certainly something that we'll be returning to explore in more detail later.
Yes, that's interesting. And on the opposite, we can see fragmentation, which is also the kind of paradox that we see in AgriLink on how to try to support holistic approaches and more fragmented advisory landscape. So that's interesting to see. To see both themes coming.
Okay, Pierre, I'm very aware of time, so I'm going to move on. Finally, just to remind you about our website. That's the link for our website. Currently, it's what we're calling a project website, but we're in the process of a transition to developing a longer term website, which we aim to have in place for a substantial period of time after the project is finished. But whilst the project is running, certainly we'd encourage you to, or for the remaining period of the project, we'd encourage you to follow us on Twitter, and specifically in the next few days, please don't hesitate to tweet about the conference, and we'd encourage you to use the hashtag, which is there, hashtag AgriLink 2020. And finally, thank you very much for your participation, and we really hope that you enjoy the conference. And I'm going to hand you back now to Pierre.
Okay, thank you very much, Mark. I share my presentation. Could you confirm that you can see it now in the lecture mode? And is it okay?
Yeah, that's good.
Perfect. So again, thank you all for joining and for participating. Quick reminder not to forget to switch your microphone. So the aim now is to introduce you to AgriLink project. So AgriLink, I forgot to say that it stands for Agricultural Knowledge Linking Farmers, Advisors and Researchers to Boost Innovation. So in this introduction, I will present the logic of the project, what we achieved, then highlight some of our key findings, and finally introduce to the different sessions of the final conference. And I remind you that the aim of the conference is both to present some of our findings, but also to try and contribute to debate about how to enhance advisory practices and policy for more sustainable development of European agriculture. So the first thing is to remind precisely the context in which we are at the moment. A key feature of this context is that we can say, I guess, that advisory services are really back on policy agenda. This is especially true today with the new CAP framework and the discussion of AICI's plan, in which advisory services play a key role. But we can also see it at the level of practitioners and advisors, and I'm very happy that more than 30 advisors join today. And we can see that more and more there are some association and professional organization of practitioners, including at the EU level, the EU funds that play a growing role in policy making. But also on the policy side, there has been the SCAR ACIS group, which has been very active in the last year to discuss about advisory policies at the EU level. And lastly, there is also a strong reinvestment on research about advisory services, especially at the European scale, with a series of projects that deal with this issue, such as Insight, Solinsa, ProACIS, AgriLink, but also Liaison and I2Connect. And in this conference, we will try to make some link with this project, especially with Liaison and I2Connect. But at the same time, we have this renewal of interest about advisory services. We consider that there are still a lot of gaps about what we know about farm advisory services. And the first one really is about farmers. We do consider that there are still some gaps about farmers' need for advisory services, but also about farmers' practices. What are their sources of advice? And this is also more important as there are some sharp structural changes in farm community, in farmers with bigger farm, more employees on the farm, gender issue, stronger heterogeneity of farms. But on the other side, there are also some big knowledge gap about advisory services. The word privatization come up in the word cloud very importantly, and fragmentation also. And this may refer to the fact that we have new entrants and more pluralistic and diverse advisory landscape at the moment. That raise many questions. And another knowledge gap related to this one is that we also need to better understand how do advisory organizations provide services. How do they innovate? How do they accommodate with a new mode of interactive innovation, co-design, such as living labs? How do they cope with digitalization also? And the last point is that we have some new policy settings that emerge, especially at the EU level, and we still need to better understand what was the effect of these EU policies. So the aim of the project was to try to address these various knowledge gaps. Sorry, just drinking a bit of water. So we try to address this various knowledge gap with a specific perspective to build a renewed understanding of farm advice. And very central to our project was really to start from farmers' perspective. So we could say that we really chosen a farmer-centric approach to try to go a bit beyond the usual suspect of studies about farm advisory services. So we start from farmers, and we started from a huge diversity of type of farmers, including both atypical profiles and mainstream farmers. But also when we look at the role of advisory services in innovation, we consider both adopters of innovation, but also non-adopters and droppers. So our work remained on investigation with farmers, which means that we did not start with a preconceived or predefined conception of advisory services. For us, advice was an activity to bring or co-produce knowledge with farmers to find solutions with them and for them. But then we look at any advisors acknowledged as such by farmers, which led us encounter a wide diversity of type of advisors. First, we distinguish between professional and occasional advisors. So professional advisors are people for which advice is the main activity, whereas occasional advisors are people mentioned as advisors by farmers, but for which it is not a profession. It may be peers, it may be researchers and other kind of actors. Then among the professional advisors, we consider two categories: independent advisors, on the one hand, people that provide only advice and who have no interest in the type of advice they provide, and link advisors that provide advice on a professional basis, but together with other activities that could be other such services like training or bookkeeping, but also trade on equipment, machinery, input, and so on. So this is very important because our findings are really based on this farmer-centric approach and open conception of what farm advice is today. A second important pillar of our renewed understanding of farm advice relates to the multi-actor dimension of the project. We try to rely on this multi-actor dimension to be responsive to both policy context, but also to the societal sustainability challenges faced by agriculture. And the first big choice that we made is to really acknowledge the fact that there is no systematic relation between innovation on one side and sustainability on the other side. This is why we study a wide range of innovation, technological, such as new digital technology, process like soil management, for instance, but also marketing and with direct marketing and organizational innovation, for instance, with new labor organization. And for each type of innovation, there may be controversies on their effect on sustainability. And we precisely look at the role that advisory services play with farmers to help them adopting or not the different types of innovation. And the second very important aspect of our multi-actor dimension is that we do not consider there is any silver bullet or standard solution that could be spread across context and history. That means that what we need to discuss is rather about best fit and option about how to enhance farm advisory services. And we consider that to discuss this option, it's very important to organize events and workshops and to provide setting where we can openly discuss and build options with stakeholder visa advisors or policymakers. So this dimension of the project was, of course, enforced by the multi-actor dimension. Please. Yes, thank you. So the multi-actor dimension, I won't get into the whole detail of who participates to the project. You have a map of the 13 countries represented. The multi-actor can appear in the fact that we have both research institute and university, but also different type of farm advisory organizations that are both public, private, but also farmer-based organizations who join the project. Before I go more in detail about our results, a few words about how we think we impacted and contributed to produce knowledge on the role of advice for innovation and sustainable development. First of all, we on the academic side, we came with new concepts and methods that were published in different reports and papers. The first one is about Microadvice, which is an understanding of the network of the advisory network at farm level. That will be extensively presented today during the two sessions, and the farm advice regime concept on the other side. The second impact of the project is its strong empirical content. As I stressed in one of my first slides, a starting point for us was this statement that there is a strong knowledge gap about farmers and about farmers' needs and practices regarding advisory services. This is why we have decided to conduct a large number of interviews, more than 1,000 farmers interviews, and more than 250 interviews with advisory suppliers. We also produced empirical content about co-design method. We implemented living labs in 6 countries, and we proceed to an extensive monitoring and evaluation of this living lab. About the multi-actor dimension of the project and responsiveness to social context, we organized many different workshops, online or face-to-face, more than 40 workshops with advisors and policymakers, with a total of 500 participants. And I will give more detail on this in the later slide. And of course, we have an academic dissemination ongoing with more than 25 papers being drafted at the moment and 2 special issues being prepared. One on the Journal of Agricultural Extension and Education and one for Your Choices. So coming back now to a more detailed presentation of our results. The first result, which was linked to the first work package of the project coordinated by Leon Sutherland, was to propose this farmer-centric approach to better understand farm advisory services. So basically, what is at the center of AgriLink that you may have seen already is what we call farmer microadvice. So the microadvice is a concept that stands for the sources of knowledge and advice that farmers personally assemblage to decide to adopt or not an innovation. So what we do is that we have a model of farmers' decision with different steps, and we look at the sources of advice for farmers at these different steps. I will not get into much more detail in this presentation, as this will be the aim of the next one, starting at 2:30 Central European Time, facilitated by Liam. So you will get much more insight on this concept in the next session. But what's important for us is that this microadvice concept, in our view, is important not only to understand farmers' practices and use of services and potentially some gaps, but also that it can express some changes at other level, at the level of what we call farm advice regime, that is institution, the norms, the rules, the standards that frame the activity of advisory suppliers. So it's a two-way direction. First, the farmers' practices may change these rules, but this will play on farmers' access and practices regarding farm advisory services. And we consider that all together, these findings may have some implication to understand the broader policy and institutional environment. So this is a framework upon which we based our research. As I say, the second achievement, which was on a work package led by Livia Madureira and Cristina Micheloni, was to inform this framework with a strong empirical content and many farmers interview. What you can see on the bottom of the slide is one illustration of this data collection. What you can see is the source of advice mentioned by farmers in 3 countries about which type of advisory organization supply them with information about digital technology solution. And you can see a graph on the left about Czech Republic, France in the middle, and Norway on the right. And there you can see huge differences between countries. Like in France, in the middle, farmers cooperative plays a central role in informing farmers, whereas in Norway, it's mostly the private sectors and farmers. And in Czech Republic, it's much more diverse, but we can see that their farmers are directly connected to research organizations. More globally, the Microadvice survey gives some quite interesting results. First of all, we saw a strong heterogeneity of Microadvice between farmers and across innovation area. Maybe a more surprising result was, even though there is a strong heterogeneity between farmers, the Microadvice of a given farmer tend to be little diversified. It means that each farmer will trust a limited number of sources of advice and try to stick to this advice. As a result, it means that the Microadvice, or the knowledge network of farmers at this micro level cannot be easily predicted based upon a description of AGIS, of knowledge system at a national level. That means that the very relevant work that was done in ProAgis and what is that is updated in I2 Connect is very useful, but it does not predict the sources of advice that farmers will actually use at a more micro level. And this is particularly linked to the fact that the sources of advice of farmers often consist also or mainly on what we call link advice or occasional advice that play a very important role. And this type of advice may be overlooked in national or more global studies. Before I go to next result, I should warn that this result, of course, should be interpreted with caution. Even though our sample is big with more than 1,000 farmers, it's not representative but purposive, and it was really aimed to explore the diversity of Microadvice and not to be representative of all situations. Nevertheless, the fact that we observe some common trend across countries, across innovation area, we consider that it's a rather robust basis to draw some conclusion and discussion about advisory services. And one conclusion is that these changes that we observe at micro level may have some implication at other levels. And that this transformation of farmers' practices and access of services could in fact be the expression of changes in what we call the institution of advice. I mean, the rules, the norms, the standards that frame the activity of advisors. That while we encapsulated in our concept of farm advisory regime, that we analyze this with 2 different perspectives. The first one starts from a public policy perspective. So we try to understand this institution by analyzing specifically some advisory policy. And typically we did a survey about the EU FAS regulations, the farm advice regulation of the CAP that you may all be aware. And we did a study in the country highlighted in green on the map. And what we did is that we contrasted what we learned about institution of advice from this policy perspective with what we learned from a more bottom-up perspective based on our survey of advisory organizations in different innovation areas. This brought 2 main results. The first one is about public policy and the fact that when we look at the implementation of EU FAS, for instance, the diversity of implementation of this policy highlighted the fact that advisory policy are still shaped by different conception of farm advisory regime, by different models. And the difference between these models partly rely to the respective role given to public, private, and third sector actors. We still have countries where predominantly there is a statist view where the key actor of supply of services acknowledged by public policy are public. That contrasts with other contexts where the key actors are private sector actors, mostly independent consultants, supported by market-oriented public policy regarding advice. And then we have intermediary solution where third sector and industry play a growing role, like in collective regime, where public policy are shaped by institutions that relate farmers organization, farmers union, and the state, or more segmentalist perspective, where it's conceived at a level of supply chain with a bigger role of cooperative and industries. But that's what is very interesting in the second result, that regardless the type of model that support public policy, we saw some very transversal changes in all the country where we did some investigation. This result showed some more gradual changes in advisory services that we can relate to the result of work package 2. First, and it's related to the fact that we see a very important role of services which are delivered by organizations that are not specialized in advice and that may not be the type of organization or supplier actually targeted by policy. And when we did our survey with this organization, what we find is that even though these organizations are not specialized in advice, they may provide services with the same feature as independent or specialized advisors. Interestingly, these suppliers are often what we call linked suppliers that provide services together with other activity, bookkeeping, training, or research, but also that provide services together with trade of input, output, or machinery. In other words, what we can see is that we have new layers of advice that may come from sector other than agriculture. And interestingly, their role could be direct or more indirect. So they could directly provide services to farmers, but most often they also play a role in what we call the back office by supporting the networks and sources of knowledge of other suppliers of services. So this image brings some interesting insight about the bottom-up transformation of advisory services, highlighting some very complex setting and informal regulation of the sector. And for us, this gives also more importance to designing relevant multi-actor setting to design services for farmers in this context. That's why we wanted to test one of these methods to co-design advisory services for farmers. And one package that were coordinated by Herman Schorlemer and Melanie van Rij was specifically dedicated to this activity. So concretely, we implemented living labs in 6 contexts: Spain, Romania, Norway, Latvia, Italy, and one jointly in Belgium and Netherlands. And the aim of this living lab was to co-design innovation support services together between advisors, researchers, and farmers. So we experienced this living lab for almost 3 years, and there were 2 major learnings. First of all, we identify the condition in which such co-design setting may be relevant. Some of them relate to basic methodological preparation, toolboxes, and enabling setting, but also the complexity of the challenge should be addressed, and the energy to move locally may also be a key element of success. And again, this element will be highlighted tomorrow morning in a specific session facilitated by Herman, Melody, and many other colleagues. So really, if you want to learn more about all the toolbox and conditions for living labs, I really invite you to join this session. And also, we will have consideration on how having specific method for monitoring and evaluating such kind of co-design setting may enable to learn about their efficacy, efficiency, and effectiveness, not only within a given living lab, but also between and maybe beyond this living lab. So please join tomorrow morning if you want to learn more about this lab. Another feature of AgriLink was to try to conceive right from the beginning a form of integration of our results, which means that we add within the project a specific work package and task to try to integrate the findings coming from a different perspective that may come from the interview with farmers in work package 2, but also the interview with advisory organization, the policy analysis, but also the living lab exercise. So it was not an easy task, given we have hundreds of pages of report and very strong empirical material, but we managed to identify a set of cross-cutting results that we will publish in the form of practice abstract. But moreover, that opened a discussion about potential changes in our lenses, in the paradigm that we are using to analyze and design farm advisory services by trying to better acknowledge a farmer-centered approach. This integrated assessment was also supported by specific workshops that we organize with stakeholders that we call socio-technical transition scenarios that we organize in certain countries. So this scenario were using a participative approach based on vision building and backcasting methodology. And it really enabled to work on pathways, on options, how to build more integrated advice. And it has also outcome about the method itself and about how to better use this scenario method in the co-design of advisory method. So this will be as well discussed tomorrow morning. So please join the session. So, and the sixth achievement is, of course, about the dissemination of results. I will be rather fast in this. We organize a set of workshops at international conferences. We have a special issue. But I want to highlight the fact that we try to set a variety of events, despite the fact that the sanitary crisis could have made it a bit difficult to organize. So we had different regional seminars to present our results, organized in 26 regions, plus 4 e-workshops online, and 13 scenario workshops that we organized with stakeholders. So about the legacy of the project, first of all, what we want to leave is some contribution to the academic community with key concepts such as the micro-AKIS and farm advice regime, but also the strong empirical content that we produce with our interview with farmers and advisory suppliers. But we hope to also provide resources for advisors. So about Living Lab, we have an online pedagogical module that is freely accessible on the platform of the Open University. You will be given a presentation of this module tomorrow morning. We have a workbook on STS and this set of practice abstracts that we try to design in a friendly way for users. We also try to produce some resources for policymakers with policy recommendation, and that will be published in the next CAR-AKIS group report. And lastly, as Mark explained, we will have a legacy website where you can find all of information for the next 10 years. And it's been organized with specific strength guides for researcher, advisors, and policymakers. I will now conclude in 2 minutes with a short introduction to the different sessions of our conference. So just to remind you that our aim is not only to present research results and findings, of course we will throughout our presentation, but we want also to try to contribute to the debate about how to enhance practice and policy of farm advisory services. And we will do this by highlighting and showcasing the 2 main outcomes of our work. The first one, which is based on our farmer-centric approach, that reveals some difficulties or pitfalls in linking AKIS at national level and at the level of farmers' micro-AKIS. So we will turn it the other way around to see whether we could use findings at the micro-AKIS level to link in a bottom-up perspective. And we also try to use the outcome of our co-design workshop to showcase some results and identifying conditions when and where we can use this method. So the first session, just after this one, after a short break that will be facilitated by Liane and Christina, starts from the micro-AKIS approach. As our project has this farmer-centric dimension, we find it would be wise to start from a farmer-centric methodology and our concept of microEKIS. But the idea is that it's not only to present findings, but to discuss with you whether we could have other use of this concept, maybe to design a good fit services for farmers. So what you will find in this session will be a feedback on the concept, illustration of resulting case study, but also video with advisors' testimony about how microEKIS may help their reflexivity. And we will have different moments of collective discussion with you on this issue in specific question and answer session. Then tomorrow morning, we will have a session facilitated by Herman, Melanie, and many other colleagues to promote tools to co-design and manage advisory services. It will be a very rich session with a series of workshops to demonstrate the potential and limitation of various tools. So you will find them a session on how to assess farmers' needs regarding advisory services, 2 sessions about Living Lab, how to identify the condition to set them, and then how to implement them with an introduction to a specific online course by our colleague Andy. We will demonstrate one of the tools, which is called peer-to-peer mentoring, with a live exercise thanks to the participation of one Norwegian advisors, and 1 session on new opportunity to provide more integrated advice. Then tomorrow afternoon, we will have a joint session with FAO. So this session will tackle the issue of digitalization. Digitalization was not the central topic of AgriLink, but nevertheless, we had a lot of insight on digitalization in 2 perspectives. The first one is that we had case studies that specifically look at the role of advisory services to disseminate this technology. But on the other way around, we found that this technology may transform the way advisory services is provided. And we met Nevena Alexandrova from FAO, and we found that there is many common points of debate between North and South experiences that we want to share in the webinar. And also we'll be happy to welcome the Professor Gianluca Giannori from the University of Pisa, who will give an inspiring conclusion tomorrow afternoon. And then the final session will be about our policy recommendation, or what we prefer to call options. Given the specific agenda in the moment where we are at the moment where AKIS plans are discussed in different countries, we consider to have a roundtable to try to best embed our policy option in this given concept. So we decided to organize a roundtable together with Inge van Oost from DG Agri, who is our policy officer, but also with Suzanne from Inschozen from the Liaison project about interactive innovation, and also Sylvain Sturel from the I2 Connect project, coordinator of the project about advisors training. And Natalia Belostad from India and AgriLink partner will also join. So thanks to our 4 speakers, but also to Tom Kelly, who will close this session. Just a short teaser, the hot topic to be discussed in this session will be about the notion of independent advice, about inclusiveness of advice regarding farm and farm worker diversity, about advisors training, and about integrated advice for sustainable development. And this will be organized Friday morning. So that's it for this session. I will take this opportunity to thank again all the participants to AgriLink project. It was a very intense project with a lot of positive energy, but I want especially to thank you all for joining to this final conference. We are very happy to have so many participants to our conference. I hope you will find a lot of inspiring ideas, but also that we will learn from you in this session.